This is Planning for the Future, the podcast.
Welcome to the show. We're sitting here with Erin Sinclair. She's the president of Sinclair Financial Solutions here in St. Louis. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
How did you get started as a financial advisor, looking into long-term care and everything like that?
Well, I joined the industry back in 2008 when the market crashed, actually, and I was just heartbroken when all these good, hardworking people had lost their money that was completely out of their control. And I went to school to become a teacher, and instead I turned into insurance and then the investment side of things. So I teach on a daily basis, but I have family and friends who have been negatively affected, if you will, by the nursing homes or at-home care and things like that. And I didn't want that to happen to anybody if I could help it. That's
a big thing that I find with advisors. They all have this little teaching gene in there, especially the good ones, the ones that it's of course it's about money because we all need to make money. But when you're doing something, it's nice to be able to enjoy what you do, and you like to. Whether you make $1 million or not off it, if you can help educate somebody and make their life a little bit better, I find a lot of advisors do that. So that's a good thing.
Well, one of the things I've always said, and my family and friends could love or hate me for this, but I've always made sure to tell everybody what I do. And in the sense of, I don't just do long-term care planning, but that's the majority of what I do, but also life insurance, other things like that. But I make sure to tell people as much as I can because I don't want anybody to go through a negative situation and think, oh, Erin could have helped me, but she didn't come to me or she didn't tell me about it. So I'm definitely not shy when it comes to telling people about what I do, because if I could have helped them and they didn't know that I could do that, that's on me. And so I try and tell everybody what I do.
Are you one of those people, though, even if they have another advisor, you're like, well, make sure they're doing this for you. Make sure you're doing that for you. And, and again, people always come to me for advice about doing things, whether it be podcasts or commercials or writing or anything like that. And I'm like, well, just make sure they're doing that. Make sure you're doing this. And, you like to help out, regardless if they're your client or not. You still want to see the right things happen for them.
Absolutely. I definitely say that I'm not here to knock out your current advisor. I'm here to complement your current advisor. When it comes to the investment side of things, I will never be the smartest person in the room. But when it comes to the long-term care side of things, I definitely specialize in that. And so I do make sure there's a checklist. And again, it's not to knock the person out, but to complement it, because we are working for you. So your agents, your CPAs, your lawyers, we all work for you together. So at the end of the day, the client is what matters. So it's partnering with people is my goal all the time.
Do you find it difficult trying to teach people how it has changed so much? Like the long-term care planning is so different from what it was, like probably what you're talking about, how you had, close relationships that did not do well in, with long-term care. I mean, it can really devastate someone financially. And thank God the rules and all of financial planning for long-term care has changed. It's not the use it or lose it scenario.
Yes, most people, when I explain to them about the asset-based long-term care and the different the tax laws that exist now, that the ability to use your IRA money for long-term care and not have to pay taxes on it, people generally look at me and almost, guffaw, like it's too good to be true. How come I don't know about that? Well, unless you're in the insurance industry, unless you want to fall asleep at night, nobody calls the insurance agent or reads an insurance book. So it is night and day difference from when my great-grandma and I had a great uncle in the nursing homes, and they read up on everything. Some had money, some didn't. And Medicare and Medicaid has changed so much, and maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. But unless you do this on a daily basis, most people emotionally knee-jerk react. They don't have a plan. But also, since they don't have a plan and people don't want to talk about getting sick or dying, they just push it off until tomorrow, and then it's sometimes too late. So I do pre-planning, whether you're 55, and I do crisis mode if somebody's already diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, or doesn't have any money. So whether you have money or don't have any money, that's not a reason to talk to a person. The conversation needs to be had regardless of what your bank account says.
Absolutely. I mean, it's 7 out of every 10 people are going to need some sort of long-term care help within their lifetime.
After the age of 65, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's, the weird part is if you interview 100 people and tell them that, well, about 7 out of every 10 are going to say, well, that's not me.
That's not going to happen to me.
It's not going to be me. But obviously, if we're in a room and only 3 people aren't going to need that, and that's miraculous,
right,
to not need it in any way, shape, or form, that's stuff that really has to sink in. And I think the way that it has changed has maybe started to take away the stigma of it, and learning how rock solid your investments can be. It's, this isn't 401ks. This isn't, people during the pandemic, their 401ks were devastated again. And that takes a good 7 years to get back to where you were,
right,
as opposed to, with the long-term care planning and you're doing the asset-based, where those assets are pretty solid. I mean, you didn't see a whole lot of fluctuation or anything.
Correct. You didn't lose a dollar, but
right,
you may not have, with the interest rates and everything, you may not have grown the much money. I'm very conservative when it comes to the insurance and investment side of things. Now, people who know me might laugh at that because they know me as a personality that maybe I'm not as conservative. But when it comes to people's money and planning, when COVID hit, everybody called, is my money okay? You're fine. And that was exactly why I joined the industry in 2008, to make sure that if something unprecedented, which, by the way, I hate that word now, unprecedented happened, they're protected. But COVID has proven that my grandmother was supposed to move in a nursing home, an independent facility this past March, and she lives about 30 minutes south. We were just trying to get her closer. Well, she will now never move into an assisted living or an independent because we've seen what's happened with the nursing home. So the planning's even more important to get that at-home care nurse and the proper companies with the proper accreditations. I mean, they're popping up left and right, but do you want a person who just, took some classes last week and they're now taking care of you, or do you want some better, official RNs and things like that? And that's also what's in the book.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about the book. Your book also is a new edition of Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home. It's the LGBTQ edition.
That is correct.
How did you get started with working with the LGBTQ community?
Well, I started playing rugby about 18 years ago, and if you don't know what rugby is, and rugby people hate this explanation, it's a combination of soccer and football, but there's no pads, and all you have is a mouth guard. And, a majority of the community is LGBTQ, which to me didn't obviously make a difference because people are people. But as I, hung around my teammates and such, I saw the differences in how they were treated, whether they are going to the doctor or going to a therapist or anything along those lines. They have to Google LGBTQ friendly. And to me, that's mind-blowing that, it's 2020. We're obviously still having, daily conversations about this. But I thought, if there's a way I can help the community, and the best way that I know how, which is the insurance and investment side of things, I'm going to write this book just to make sure that they know that somebody's out there looking out for them. And again, this conversation, unless it affects you when you're 65 and older, nobody thinks about it. But by the time you are older, sometimes there's no children involved. Sometimes the families aren't involved anymore. Maybe they don't communicate anymore. And they are very good at planning because they've been alone, had to worry about themselves a lot. So I just wanted to say, without rugby and without the LGBTQ community, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I just want to give back the best way that I know how.
Right. And, you said something earlier when we were talking about that is the difference is the long-term care planning, the age group of the long-term care planning. That was a group that had to stay hidden when they were, if you're in the LGBTQ community. I mean, nobody knew. It was always like, oh, Aunt Sarah and her friend have been living together for, 24 years before, it became, easier At least
be in the
easier.
open,
Yeah,
correct.
easier to be open. It's still not easy by any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that.
Correct.
But easier, at least as, things have changed. So
Oh yeah, my friends who are in their 20s and 30s, they'll happily hold hands, and they should be allowed to. And my clients and friends that are 50 on up, they will not hold hands in public. And that's just, and unfortunately, that's the way that it was. And you always have a person said, there's nobody, like that, quote unquote, that live around me. And it's like, well, for one, that's a whole nother conversation,
right.
But, people are people, and they don't, I just want to help the best way that I can. And again, it's such a complex conversation, but also, unless you're in insurance, it's incredibly boring. But I'm an insurance nerd. I'll talk about this stuff all day long. But I think the book it's just an opening conversation. It's not going to give you all the answers. It's just going to be able to have that dialogue with you and your partner, or you and your spouse, or your parents, because like the World War II generation, they didn't talk about money.
Right.
The parents didn't tell their kids. They maybe had a will, but definitely not a trust. And if they had a will, it was probably not written as complex as it could be. And now we're seeing, if you don't have the conversation, the money if you don't properly plan it, it can affect up to 4 generations.
Sure.
And think about the baby boomers who are taking care of their parents. They're working, and then they are taking care of their kids who possibly have grandkids. And then all 4 of those generations can be affected. And the state, whether they don't care if you have $1 or $1 million, they're going to make sure they get their portion of it. So let's just, you worked hard for your money. Let's give the state the appropriate amount and keep the rest.
100%. I mean, just like the way it was, my parents and my grandparents, you had no idea how much money they had. You had no idea what their plans were. When something happened to them, you went, well, let's go find the will,
Right.
And you do find that people are starting to involve their kids more when it comes to their financial planning. Sometimes, it's not necessarily asking for their advice, but letting them know what is in place and, everything there. I mean, and sometimes you need to do things like put together your trusts and everything, and you need to have someone who's going to get your power of attorney.
Correct.
And it's generally going to be one of your kids or, someone close. Or, if it's an LGBTQ community, you're going to find someone who is close. So you need to involve those other people in there and, make sure that your wishes are put out correctly.
To me, that's the most important thing. You're in charge of your life every day, and then all of a sudden you get sick, and what your wishes are may not happen unless it's on paper and unless it's notarized or properly documented, and I just was over in England. I played rugby over in England with my St. Louis team here in town, and I put my will and trust in place before I went over there. Not that I have a whole lot of assets that I need to protect, but to guarantee that, if something happened to me and after 30 days, if I'm not coming out of a coma or whatever, cut the cord and then have a big party. I don't want, I don't want a wake. I don't want a funeral. I want a memorial and then donate my body to science type thing. And those are my words and my documentation. Now, of course, if I ever get married and have children, that could obviously change.
Sure.
But at that case and time, you never know what's going to happen, and, some people, again, insurance nerds, some people say I'm a little bit overly too much of a planner, but it's beneficial to everyone. And then because when emotions are involved, you need the children need steps of what to do, or their friends need steps of what to do of their people's wishes. Otherwise, you may end up at a place where you never wanted to go. And, whether you believe in God or you believe that, ashes to ashes type thing, you still want to have your wishes at the end of your life.
Absolutely. And just get your ducks in a row so you're not ending up in probate. Probate is one of the easiest things in the world to avoid, but it certainly messes everything up when you're in it. I mean, it is, I always say it's the dirty word. It's crazy. But again, it's so easy to avoid, and just a little bit of education, and all the great little tips and everything in the book. You have little different nuances because it's the LGBT community and the way that laws have changed and, cohabitation. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that domestic partner benefits from companies.
Correct.
Like I know that Express Scripts early on was one of the earlier companies, big pharmacy benefits company here in St. Louis, was one of the early on companies to offer domestic partner benefits, and which was huge. And I mean, it's quite a, this is quite a long time ago. It's probably 18, 19 years ago almost. But think about that. That's new. That's